Hello and welcome to Hawkeye Nation. This is Hotcast, your Iowa football, basketball, and recruiting podcast brought to you by Go Iowa Awesome and Rivals.com. I'm your recruiting analyst and host, Elliot Clough, at Elliot Clough on Twitter, joined by publisher Adam Jacoby and managing editor Ross Binder. As always, no game to preview going into this weekend as it is a bye week, but you might be thinking this is becoming a Noah Shannon podcast for the sheer amount of times we've had to talk about him and his suspension, along with all the betting things that happened this offseason, allegations, what have you. But as if not only Noah Shannon, but the Iowa fan base needed another kick in the nuts, they got one just about half an hour ago, I believe it was, per Nicole Auerbach of is it Auerbach, I don't know, of The Athletic. The Division I Council Coordination Committee delayed its vote on proposals for changes to student-athlete reinstatement guidelines related to sports wagering violations for 2 weeks. So what we believed the timeline to be for Noah Shannon, once things kind of changed with the NCAA, they were going to consider changing the penalties for these sports wagering violations. We believe the timeline to be his possible return, more than likely against the game or on the game for the game against Northwestern in Chicago in a couple weeks. And now that is pushed back to November 11th against Rutgers. So Adam, Ross, and I all had a brief conversation about it on Slack, and we're all kind of collectively thinking this is stupid. Adam, you're going to write about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is the headline that I'm going to have for this article is that the gut punch parade continues for Iowa fans, because that's what this is. And to have it come on the heels of what really feels like for Iowa fans, like they're going to feel like there's been a miscarriage of justice, regardless of what the NCAA did with Noah Shannon today, right? Between how the Big Ten has handled the Cooper DeJean punt return / invalid signal, and the extent to which the Big Ten went out of its way to say, no, the process was good, when there isn't a single Iowa fan that believes that. They've had to hear from the governor that everything was good about the investigation that led to these suspensions in the first place. And again, nobody believes that, not even from Iowa or Iowa State's fan base. And there are so many questions about the basic validity of the investigation to begin with, that to hear the person, the elected official who represents everybody in the state of Iowa say, yep, all that was good, and everyone was just doing their jobs, that's not going to be satisfactory for Iowa State and Iowa fans too. And then this on top of that, and on top of all of the bad luck that has befallen the football team. I mean, I can't remember a more star-crossed 6-2 team than this one. Not at Iowa, just in college football, in the Big Ten. I can't remember just gut punch after gut punch after gut punch. And again, on a 6-2 team. So I think Iowa fans have every right to feel betrayed about what the NCAA has done. I think the Shannon family absolutely has a right to feel betrayed about all of this. And I say all that without a but coming. There is no but. You should feel betrayed if you're invested in this Iowa football program in any way, shape, or form, as a fan, as a player, as a family member. You should feel upset about this, because it is really, really, really hard to see how this is fair in any way, shape, or form to Noah Shannon or any of the other affected athletes. It's very difficult to see that, and nothing that the NCAA has provided, other than member institutions need 2 more weeks for feedback. Like, what are they doing? Walking it to Indianapolis? Like, it's ridiculous, and it really requires so much more explanation than we've gotten, and that we are going to get. And that is, it's really, really hard to justify that in my mind. Ross, any thoughts on your part about anything from the last, I don't know, half an hour, 45 minutes?
I mean, there is no justification because it's just bureaucracy at work. Like, they're not going to explain what's happening because they can't or won't, and no explanation would be, satisfactory. Like, what's the explanation? We need 2 more weeks for feedback. I mean, that's ludicrous. They've had weeks to solicit feedback. So, it it's just it's an absurd decision because we know where they're going, we know what they're going to do, and every indication is that they're reconsidering their the rules around gambling and reinstatement, and they're going to amend them to something more sensible, which is good.
Sure.
But they're doing it in in such a you know long-winded way, and Noah Shannon is now going to be missing, that'd be 9 games, so that's 75% of his senior season. Right? I think.
Yeah. Yeah.
Out of math.
And missing them, sorry, but just so we're clear on this, missing them so he can wait for the NCAA to say that he shouldn't have been suspended at all, right? So they can retroactively grant him the eligibility that he's increasingly not going to be able to use. That's just want to be clear about that, right?
Right.
Yeah. Anyway, sorry.
No, I mean, you're absolutely right. It's just a complete, bureaucratic pretzel of, inane logic that isn't there, that, we're going to, and they don't think they're punishing Noah Shannon, but they are, because, he has so few games remaining in his career. And obviously the other players that are affected as well, there are other athletes too. And, taking games away from them just for no good reason other than the NCAA can't do this, now. They have to wait 2 weeks to do something that the decision is going to be the same in 2 weeks as it would be today. So, what's the holdup?
I have several things to say regarding this whole situation. Regarding feedback, what are we doing right now, us three? We're on a Zoom call.
Yeah. That's right. Where you can offer thoughts. Some might call them feedback, right?
How damn hard is that to schedule with these bureaucrat know-it-all something or others? I had a word in my mind that I'm not going to say. And go ahead, Adam.
Here's the problem with what happens when the NCAA only shares information like, oh, we're going to wait for more institutional or member feedback. When that's all that you give people, that's an incomplete picture, and you're leaving it up to their imagination to fill in the rest of the blanks. And people's imagination about college athletics is an absolute insane place to be. And I'm not saying that to be judgmental of college football fans, because it goes for all sports fans and really all people who are looking for an explanation about an institution that they don't really have a whole lot of insight in, right? Like there's nothing wrong with that. But you're leaving them to fill in the blanks. And imaginations have this incredible way of finding the darkest territory possible. So I could be sitting here, Joe Hawkeye could be sitting there in Marion or Cedar Rapids or what have you, and he could have the idea that Shannon's eligibility just got delayed more because Northwestern, like somebody in the Northwestern athletic department said, oh, if we say that we've got more questions, we can keep him off the field, right? And nothing about what the NCAA has given to fans, especially Iowa fans and Iowa State fans, has led them to believe that idea, and that's one of so many different scenarios that somebody could concoct. And some of these scenarios are going to be even more unhinged than that. When the NCAA doesn't give information that would disprove any of that, or at the very least lead people to understand why any of this happened, and not even so much as a cursory, hey, sorry affected athletes, but our process takes longer, then what it looks like to fans, especially ones as invested as Iowa fans are, what it looks like is this is the NCAA working as intended. That what the bureaucrats really want is Noah Shannon to not get back on the field, right? Like what they really want is to jerk him around for the rest of his eligibility, to make an example out of him. People can believe that, and the NCAA has not done enough to earn that benefit of the doubt that they're not just jerking him around. And that's a really, really tough place to put a fan base, especially a fan base that, again, just went through this with the Big Ten and the refereeing decision, and is really going through a whole lot in terms of what has befallen the football program this year, right? Meet the fan base. It doesn't even have to be halfway. Meet the fan base 10% of the way, so they don't have to react so negatively to something like this. Give them something more than we've delayed our decision, right? Because it's one thing to delay a decision. Okay, I do that all the time. It's another when somebody's eligibility is rapidly running out, and this somebody is very important, and all parties involved basically understand that this was not a suspension-worthy transgression, and that's an accepted fact at this point. And what are we doing? Why is this still happening? This is, as Kirk Ferentz has said so many times, this could have been resolved in May. This doesn't have to be happening in October and now going into November. This doesn't have to be happening like this. And the longer it keeps happening like this, the more it's going to look to Iowa fans that this is supposed to be what's happening, and that the NCAA is actually just fine and dandy with this. And until the NCAA proves otherwise, you just sort of have to believe that. And that's a real punch in the gut.
You have to hope that they've given some sort of explanation as to the delay to Noah Shannon and to Kirk Ferentz. They're not only not giving it to us, but you have to hope that they're giving it to the people that are affected. And what this is, at least from my vantage point in this moment, is saying you made a mistake as a 22-year-old, 23-year-old, whatever he was, made a mistake. Now we're going to screw with your mind. We're not just going to screw away your eligibility, throw it down the toilet. We're going to give you hope that you're going to be able to come back at a certain date. Oh, never mind. Oh, never mind. What the hell is that? And from an organization that claims to put student athletes first, my ass. Are you kidding me?
Once again, one more little spoiler alert here, but that little snippet from their original statement when they first announced that they were going to revisit this, the little thing about putting student athlete welfare first. Oh, that is absolutely leading what I'm writing today, because and we called it from the jump. We said, hey, look, if this is really what it's about, let them play immediately, figure out the eligibility later. We said that from the get-go. The NCAA didn't do anything like that, and now here we are with the can kicked down the road once again. And I don't want to say we saw it coming, because nobody was here predicting like, oh yeah, by the way, this is right. Like nowhere on the radar was it the NCAA is going to push this 2 weeks, right? But it's also the NCAA. It's also bureaucracy. So like I'm about a 5 in terms of like how surprised I really am by this. I'm at about a 5. I'm disappointed way more than a 5, because Noah Shannon is caught in the middle of this for, like a bet, right? Like a bet on a completely different sport for something that no party involved thinks merits that punishment. Because if the NCAA really did think that that was an appropriate punishment, then they wouldn't have gone through this whole step of like, oh yeah, by the way, we're not gonna, right? So this is all, it's leaving fans in a place of so much uncertainty about everything except for the fact that Noah Shannon's welfare is not being looked after. That's the only certainty of all of this, is that nobody at the NCAA, none of these bureaucrats actually give one damn about Noah Shannon. It's too bad that it has to take something like this to make it so overt and obvious. Like at this point, there's no arguing otherwise, because to kick the can down the road 2 more weeks without an I'm sorry, without a you can go ahead and play, but just understand that there might be, an after the fact vacating the games or what have you. Like, that's one thing, but there isn't a bone being thrown to Shannon or his family or anything. And yet, I mean, Elliot, you're right. I really hope the NCAA has given something to his family and to Kirk and to the program. Every time that Kirk has talked about this process, he's saying that they haven't been getting anything from them. So I'm not going to hold my breath on that front either. And again, that's too bad that they just keep getting left in the lurch like this with no explanation. That's such a shortcoming on the NCAA's part.
You know what else this is? It's a third example of the NCAA clearly being told that they're wrong, changing a determination or changing a decision, i.e. Noah Shannon, he gets this whole year suspension. Then they say, okay, we're going to look at it. And then they say, here's the date. And then they say, oh, never mind, we're going to kick it down the road a little bit more. You know what else? This exact same thing happened to Tez Walker from North Carolina. He was denied his eligibility for the whole season. And then people came out, were outraged, justifiably so, should have been outraged because it was a stupid decision. And then they gave him his eligibility back. But what they did is that they said North Carolina failed to provide information to us previously. So not only do they come out and make these stupid decisions, they say it's your fault.
Yeah.
What? And this is, oh my God, it's petty BS. Are you kidding me? And we are talking about the livelihoods of 22-year-olds. This is a joke. Every person who's upset, especially Noah Shannon, especially Kirk Ferentz, have every single freaking right to be.
There's one thing that I'm waiting for more than pretty much anything at this point. And that's the fact that today's Wednesday evening, which means it's Hawk Talk Day, which means unless they've canceled it for the bye week, and I haven't checked whether or not they are, but if Kirk's going to be on mic with Gary Dolphin in the immediate aftermath of the NCAA announcing this, oh Lord, like it's going to make the last time, or what was it? I guess it was 3 weeks ago at this point. It's going to make that look like Mr. Rogers. Like this is going to be double barrel. This is going to, if Kirk is actually going to be on the radio tonight, and again, I haven't checked with the bye week to see if that's the case. If he is, it's going to make his presser after the Minnesota game look like an episode of Mr. Rogers. And he was daring the NCAA or the Big Ten to fine him at that point, overtly daring them. Now, I mean, we're going to get full DGAF Kirk again if they're recording today, and if not, the next time we hear from him, it's not going to be pleasant. I'm just going to tell you guys that right now.
I'm currently looking to see.
It looks like there is no show tonight, Adam. I looked it up on Hawkeye Sports. No show because of the bye week. So that is unfortunate, because we would have definitely gotten some unfiltered Kirk thoughts on this ridiculous decision, which would have been nice to hear.
Actually, that might be for the best, just because it otherwise might get the Iowa official podcast feed demonetized. Like, there's not going to be nice things said by Kirk. in the wake of this.
And let alone, like you said, after what happened against Minnesota and the Big Ten officiating body doubling down on that, man. I mean, I'd love to see him let it rip. What did he say? The one moment when he said something about it being an interesting call, he goes, "Oh, that probably wasn't vague enough. Screw it."
Yeah.
We get something better than that, I think. But not a whole lot to do about that for, well, a couple more weeks, and we will update you and talk about it as things hopefully actually progress at some point in time with the Noah Shannon ruling and the NCAA regarding the betting violations. Now, we do have a little bit more time left on this Wednesday/Thursday edition of Hawkcast here, brought to you by Iowa.Rivals.com. And we're going to talk a little bit about the remaining schedule for your Iowa football Hawkeyes. Of course, Northwestern at Wrigley Field coming up here November 4th after the bye week, followed by Rutgers at home, November 11th, Illinois at home, November 18th, and then Nebraska away. Oh, I was getting those dates. Oh, did I get them wrong? I got them right. What the heck? Okay. November 24th at Nebraska. Sorry. Reading, talking at the same time. Brain fart. Anyway, a lot of football left despite the feelings of things really, it is coming down to it now that I'm talking about it. 4 games, regular season games left, and then potentially the Big Ten championship in Indianapolis on Saturday, December 2nd. Well, as we look forward, one thing I did prior to the start of the podcast is I looked at the ability of these teams there to run the ball that Iowa will be facing, assuming they are without Noah Shannon, at least in this Northwestern game, and that's going to not exactly be a concern. When you look at Noah Shannon, when you look at the one-tech position that is so much focused on the run game, plugging holes and preventing them from getting going, Northwestern, luckily for Iowa, ranked dead last in rushing in the conference, the only team in the conference below 3 yards per carry. So that's good for the Hawkeyes.
Yeah, that'll be nice, especially with the last 2 games that the Hawkeyes had to play against teams like Minnesota and Wisconsin. Like those, they've got some big boys up front. And Iowa held its own against Wisconsin, which was promising to see. A little bit less so against Minnesota. And so I think that says something about the Gophers and about the way PJ Fleck builds his programs, and also says a little bit about how Wisconsin sort of backslid physically a little bit under Paul Chryst recently. That all said, Iowa is going to be very, very thankful that, and even Northwestern, part of the reason for the lack of their success is just because they're going up against Big Ten teams every single week. And so would they be averaging under 3 yards a rush if they're in the Pac-12 or the Big 12? Probably not. Probably, but we also don't know that for sure, because that's not a good team there in Evanston this year. The problem is Iowa is also not good enough to take any of these games for granted. And as long as that offense is still in the doldrums, that's just going to continue to be the case. So 6-6 wouldn't surprise me. 10-2 wouldn't surprise me. Anything in between would not surprise me. Okay, 6-6 might surprise me a little bit.
Hold the phone.
Yeah. Okay, 6-6 is not plausible, much less probable, but it is, if the offense continues to get worse, if the way that the coaches respond to the offense is to keep making it easier to defend, which Hawkeye Game Film essentially made that case on Twitter today, saying that when the offense starts to get in a little bit of a negative rut, what they do is they take out the motion, they take out the reads, right? They condense and simplify it. Well, who likes that better than opposing defenses, right? And it's counterintuitive, especially to an old school coach like, I don't know, Kirk Ferentz, but that sort of dynamic, if that continues against a defense like Northwestern's or like Well, no, Rutgers actually has a good defense, but you know what I mean. Like, it's going to make it easier for opposing defenses if Iowa keeps doing that, and if the coaches keep doubling down on it. So I don't think Iowa's going to lose its next 4 games, especially with how close it came to beating Minnesota. And a whole lot of people say should have beaten Minnesota. Really, really, really should have that W. Really should be 7-1. Yeah, like I think Iowa's going to win a few more games, but again, you can't take that for granted. And let's now have to throw in the fact that Noah Shannon isn't going to be able to pop in to help against Northwestern, and we don't know when he will be able to pop in and help. There's right, like that's uncertainty that Iowa has to navigate that these guys didn't expect to have to navigate 24 hours ago. So all of this uncertainty is just throwing how the season's going to end up into the air even more. And, we'll see, but there's so many different ways that this can end up. And I don't think a whole lot of them are implausible other than tanking the rest of the season. That's about it. That's the only thing that I would say is not plausible.
And
happy
you
now?
know what else? You know what else is implausible at this point? Seeing Joe Labus play quarterback. No matter what. Ross, when you look at the remainder of the schedule, what do you think? Where are the Hawkeyes going to be come 4 weeks from now?
I mean, Adam compared the offense to the doldrums, and I think that's offensive to doldrums. If we're being honest, I mean, this is the worst Power 5 offense we've seen in decades, and we thought that last year, but somehow it's even worse this year. So, I mean, I think what Adam said is right. Like, with that offense, there's just no margin of error. Every single game, the potential is there for disaster, i.e., a loss. I don't think it's likely that they're going to lose all 4. No, I mean, the defense is very good. The special teams are really good. The offense should be able to do enough, to get some more wins. But the offense, I just can't get past how bad the offense is and how much it struggles to just move the ball and get first downs and even possess the ball for long enough to give the defense more than 30 seconds on the sideline to, refresh and get back out there. And that just all adds up. Like, this bye week is great. The defense needs that as much as anyone on that team, I would say, just to rest and, get recharged for that final 4-game stretch. So, if you put a gun to my head, which please don't, that seems very rude, honestly, but it made me pick the record a month from now after the Nebraska game. I think I'd probably go 8-4, split the difference on the remaining 4 games. Which 2 they win, which 2 they lose. I think the Rutgers and Nebraska games are the ones that give me the most pause, because those are the teams with the best defenses. So you're taking an Iowa offense that's already, extremely challenged when it comes to moving the ball and scoring points. And then they're actually going to play a defense that's good at preventing teams from, opposing offenses from doing what they want to do. That worries me. So those are the games where I have the highest concern factor. But I think we'll just have to wait and see if, hopefully the offense can find something that works in this bye week and when they come back in November, because there was just nothing working these last 2 weeks, guys. I mean, that you watched it, you saw it in Madison and then against Minnesota. Like, it was so bad.
Or 25% of the time when they were running the ball in Madison, and that's it.
Right.
But through the air, like, they are one incredible catch from Deontay Vines away from just absolutely looking more inept than they already look. Like, this is
and the Stylianos catch that maybe shouldn't have been a catch at the end of the game. I mean, that's what it's taking for the passing game to have success is some just incredible individual efforts from the pass catchers, which it's tough to rely on that. That's just not a very bankable formula. Sorry, go ahead, Elliot.
I think that was
Well,
Addison Ostrango, but
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
yeah, you're good. That probably shouldn't have been a catch. But like this is it's like there's almost no words for it at this point. You think dumbfounding, you think I mean clearly there's no words for it besides dumbfounding. I mean, it's just amazing. Like, how do you not look at this and say, we need to do something different? I mean, for 2 years in a row, I just don't get it. I just really don't. And Adam, you look like you had something to say.
yeah, all I was going to add is, as Ross said, a lot of the successes came from really great plays or unusually good plays by the receivers. And when you look at it, the way that the receivers have played, especially with drops and all of that, you can't rely on them to save this passing game by themselves. And that's unfortunate too, is that, it's one thing if the quarterback is struggling, and that is clearly happening with Deacon Hill already. But if you layer on top of that the fact that when he does put balls where they need to be, when he does put them on the receiver's hands, half the time it's still hitting the turf anyway. At that point, and I'm not saying this to absolve Brian Ferentz in the slightest, because it's pretty clear that even if the receivers are making those catches, the offense isn't where it needs to be. But the fact that the receivers aren't making plays on a consistent level yet, they're just not. It's a few things. Consistent isn't one of them. The fact that that is worked into it too means that, you just have to, when you take that step back, it just doesn't look like anybody's set up to succeed in this offense. And it's honestly, the news that I was bracing myself for this week wasn't that Noah Shannon wouldn't be reinstated. It was that Brian Ferentz was just going to resign and make all of this stop for his dad. I expected that more from this week. No, I'm being dead serious when I say that. That's not a joke. Because say what you will about Brian Ferentz, but he is a guy of some stand or of some stand-up morals, right? I don't think he's a bad guy. I don't think he's got a temper, but I don't think that he would hold the program hostage by himself. That part has never tracked to me logically, just like it's never tracked to me that Kirk would resign as soon as his kid got fired. Right? That's an argument that people have never heard from me because it's never made sense to me. And I don't think it's going to get to that point. But I also think that the way that it doesn't get to that point is that Brian would be able to read the writing on the wall and be like, none of this is worth it. None of this is making me happy in any way, shape, or form. And it's doing the kids a disservice for me to keep being a distraction for the last 4 games of the season. That's what I was half expecting this entire time, especially when they didn't let any of the coordinators or any of the assistants talk to us this week. And yeah, not thrilled about that part either. But I also get how much of a distraction that would turn into. But the fact that it is a distraction, his very presence would lead me to believe that on some level, somebody in Iowa City would say, this is not, there's no upside, right?
Now, the question, if that were to happen over the next few weeks, he decides to just resign, be done with it, who becomes OC? Who calls plays? John Budmeyer?
He's
Like, I don't know what the other option is.
Is Budmeyer actually on staff though?
He's a special assistant to Kirk.
Yeah.
So he
if
is
I had to guess,
technically on staff.
I guess that applies more to recruitment or what they can do in terms of recruiting than probably potentially like game day activities.
I know he's up in the booth for game days.
Right.
I would have guessed Kelton Copeland. Like it's usually somebody else dealing with skill position players that moves in whenever an offensive coordinator moves out. But that's a guess. And
I was gonna say, would they put the wide receivers coach for the group that like I would say probably Liddell Betts or Abdul
sure,
Hodge.
I could see it. I could see both of those too. But there's also not a great correlation between how well a position unit does, especially a position unit that has so little experience as Iowa's wide receivers do, and whether or not like Copeland would be a good or a bad play caller. And also, it's also coming down to the fact that they're running a Kirk Ferentz offense. So if Brian wants to step away, okay, great, but you're still running the same playbook that's been around more or less unchanged since 1999.
Well, and on top of that, in this, hypothetical situation, which I hadn't even considered before 5 minutes ago, and now my mind is spinning. But doesn't it seem likely that Kirk would be a little bit more heavy-handed in terms of game day and the play calling? Like, I'm not saying he's going to be calling every, second and 9 or whatever, but, it feels like he'd be more involved than he is with Brian, where there's certainly, a trust in terms of, where they're going to go and what they're calling. But
I was thinking
I don't know that.
I was thinking that too, Ross.
Yeah, and I don't know that Kirk being more involved in the offense is a good thing.
Probably not.
My reaction is not.
The other thing about the possibility of going to a position coach is like the optics of putting Kelton Copeland in that position, or maybe not necessarily George Barnett. I just feel like the move is Liddell Betts because he has had some success. I mean, he was a really good player at Iowa, went on to play in the NFL, and the running back group hasn't been phenomenal, but it's not, they're not all hurt. If you go look at the tight ends, and Caleb Johnson had a great freshman season. LeSean Williams looked pretty good a couple weeks ago. Jazz Patterson now back to 100%. And again, very hypothetical situation. This isn't something that's been substantiated at all, other than in this conversation. So I would think it'd be Bud or be Betts. I would go between one of those two. I just think the optics of a Kelton Copeland promotion probably wouldn't be great.
I see what you're saying, but also I think if there's one coach that cares extremely little about optics, it's Kirk Ferentz. So like if for some if for some reason he thought Copeland was the best choice to be the play caller, I think he'd do it. But I see what you're saying about Bud Meyer and Betts for sure too. Like I totally get that logic also.
Well, gentlemen, we said we were gonna keep it short. We're about 40 minutes in. Anything else on either of the topics at hand before we get out of here and move on to this weekend?
# free Noah Shannon. That's all I got.
Absolutely. Enjoy the bye week, gentlemen.
You as well,
we
guys.
Are.
Yes. I will not be at a game this weekend for Friday Night Football, as I am enjoying the bye week, getting out of town and going to visit some family. But we'll be back at it once again next week. For those of you who do pay attention to recruiting as closely as they possibly can, I will try to get a live stream in on the way down and maybe have the girlfriend drive while I'm trying to watch some football. We'll see how that shakes out. But either way, we're still going to be getting you great content on iowa.rivals.com. Come back on Sunday/Monday, whenever we get the podcast out, because Adam, Ross, and I are going to be hitting men's and women's basketball season previews as it is the bye week for football. So very excited about that. I'm going to be getting you some basketball content here soon, as well as Adam will too. Wrestling media day tomorrow as well. Adam will be there for that. So Adam's all over the place right now doing doing the Lord's work, covering Iowa Hawkeye sports.
I've never heard driving on I-80 5 times a week as the Lord's work before, but I'm willing to do whatever the Lord asks. Right?
The Lord works in mysterious ways, Adam.
That he does. That he does.
With a Subaru.
Yeah. We'll wrap it up there. We appreciate you tuning into this episode of Hotcast, brought to you by Iowa.rivals.com. If you're not a premium subscriber yet, you can do that at Iowa.rivals.com/subscribe. Don't forget to subscribe wherever you're listening, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, etc. And if you're on YouTube, drop that like, drop a comment. Tell us what you're thinking about the whole Noah Shannon ordeal, the remainder of the season, and who you would have be offensive coordinator if Brian Ferentz decided to step away at this point in time. But for now, we'll see you next time.